The 2023 Daytona 24-hour is coming up fast, and there are a lot of topics to discuss about this event, such as the new LMDh cars, the return of the GTP class, and the new GT3 entries. So today, I'll be collaborating with IMSA YouTuber Off in the Esses, so we can deliver you 10 things you need to know before the 24 hours of Daytona in 2023.
After a reported 72 entries were interested in the 2023 edition of the Rolex 24, IMSA has finally confirmed a 61-car grid for the season opener. The grid will feature 9 of the new GTP class cars, 10 LMP2 entries, 9 LMP3 entries, 9 entries in GTD Pro after recently Turner Motorsports announced that they would be moving one of their entries from the GTD to the GTD Pro class, and a large grid of 24 GTD cars. Now, this grid was actually initially announced as 60 cars, but IMSA would later go on to unveil the Sun Energy 1 Mercedes as the 61st entry in the race, as well as confirming it for a full Michelin Endurance Cup schedule. Now, in previous years during IMSA's Roar Before the 24 weekend, there's been a 100-minute qualifying race that sets the grid for the Rolex. However, for the 2023 running, there will not be a 100-minute qualifying race. Instead, IMSA will utilize their normal qualifying procedures. This means that qualifying will start with a 15-minute session for both the GTD and GTD Pro class cars. A 15-minute session will follow for the LMP3 class, followed by a 15-minute session for the LMP2 class. And rounding up qualifying will be a 20-minute session for the GTP class cars. John Doonan has said that this qualifying race is not gone forever, and cited supply chain issues for many of the new GTP class cars as well as the new GTD class cars. It was just deemed that it's best to not have the qualifying race and risk damaging any equipment this year. Championship points will be awarded as normal for the session, which gets underway Sunday, January 22nd at 1:25 p.m. Eastern Time globally on IMSA TV. Now, Jonah, what have you got for us?
Well, one of the most exciting topics ahead of this year's 24-hour of Daytona is the introduction of the LMDh entries, along with the return of the GTP class to IMSA. LMDh, which stands for Le Mans Daytona H, is the replacement for the DPI regulations that lasted from 2017 to 2022. These LMDh entries will make their debut at this year's Daytona, so this truly is the first time we get to see these cars on track racing against each other. The LMDh entries have the option of choosing between 4 different types of chassis. The chassis designers include Multimatic, Oreca, Ligier, and Dallara. These new prototypes will be competing in the category known as GTP. The GTP class will be making its return to IMSA for the first time since 1993, and that era saw the legendary Group C cars hit the track, so hopefully the new LMDh cars will bring another golden era to IMSA. 4 manufacturers will be present at Daytona. This list includes Porsche, Cadillac, Acura, and BMW. 9 cars will be present, with 2 Acuras, 3 Cadillacs, 2 BMWs, and 2 Porsches. Team Penske will run the Porsches, Rahal Letterman Lenigan Racing will run the BMWs, Chip Ganassi Racing and Action Express will run the Cadillacs, and Meyer Shank Racing and Wayne Taylor Racing will run the Acuras. I would also like to mention that the O2 Cadillac that's racing at Daytona this year is the WEC variant of the Ganassi LMDh. This entry will head over to the WEC after Daytona, while the other 2 Cadillacs will stay in IMSA. You may have noticed that 2 of the entries from the GTP grid were not on the entry list that I just mentioned. JDC Miller Motorsports and Proton Competition, who are both running customer Porsche entries, are not going to be at Daytona. Unfortunately, the customer entries for Porsche will not be arriving until later into the season. Most likely, the 2 Porsches will be entering at Laguna Seca. But don't worry, we will be seeing JDC Miller Motorsports on the grid at Daytona. They just won't be in the GTP class. They entered in an LMP3 entry, as their Porsche 963 hasn't arrived yet. Another topic I would like to mention is that there will not be any Le Mans hypercars at the 24 hours of Daytona in 2023. The Le Mans hypercars and LMDh can race together in the same championship, but for this year, the Le Mans hypercar entries have not decided to come over to Daytona. This means we won't see teams such as Toyota, Glickenhaus, Ferrari, and Peugeot racing at Daytona this year. So a little unfortunate, but that's quite alright. We will see them in the World Endurance Championship this year, and hopefully next year, in 2024, we will see the LMH cars on the grid at Daytona.
Well, there might not be any LMH cars from the World Endurance Championship on the IMSA grid this year, but we will see 3 new GT3 spec cars. Ferrari and their new 296 GT3 is set to debut at the Rolex 24. They will have 4 of the new cars entered, and they will be run by Risi Competizione, AF Corsa, Triarsi Competizione, and Centaur Racing. The new Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2, after it was delayed a year actually, is set to debut at the Rolex 24 as well. There will be 4 of the cars on the grid, including 2 entries from Iron Lynx, the Iron Dames entry, and a car run by NT Esport, who, shout out to them, they have been extremely active on social media, especially Instagram and Reddit, documenting the build process for this car and the extremely tight timeline that they've been working under. The 3rd new GT3 spec car that will be on the grid is the Type 992 Porsche 911 GT3R. It will make its North American debut in the race with 7 cars on the grid. Fielding the car will be defending GTD Pro champions Pfaff Motorsports. Wright Motorsports will field 2 entries, one of them being under the Volt Racing banner, MDK Motorsports, AO Racing, and 2 Kelly Moss entries. Now, while there will be 3 new GT cars on the grid, one of the most popular and recognizable cars will only feature 1 entry. Corvette is reducing their car count on the Rolex grid this year down to just 1 GTD Pro entry. In fact, this will be the C8R's final IMSA season. However, fear not, Corvette racing fans, they will return strong in 2024 with the new GT3 spec Corvette Z06 GT3R. The car is expected to be delivered to the first customer teams in the fall, with a debut in 2024 for both the factory and customer teams. Moving from new cars to new corner names? Yes, they actually renamed a corner at Daytona. This was announced prior to the 2022 running of the Rolex 24 and was done as a way to honor the convergence of the ACO and IMSA. In doing so, they renamed the bus stop chicane at Daytona to the Le Mans chicane. Meanwhile, at Le Mans, the first chicane on the Mulsanne Straight was renamed the Daytona chicane. And while this was done as a way to honor and unite the 2 governing bodies, many fans haven't exactly been big on the name change and just continue to call it the bus stop chicane. Look, one thing that I will say is in the first year of it being called the Le Mans chicane, it sure gave us one heck of a finish. Back over to you, Jonah.
Thanks, Stu. Well, viewers, let's talk about the drivers that will be piloting these GT3 cars or LMP2 or hypercars on track at Daytona this year. I would specifically like to go into a certain group of drivers, and that's current IndyCar drivers on track at Daytona. This list includes 6-time IndyCar champion and already winner of the 24 Hours of Daytona, Scott Dixon, who will drive the 01 Chip Ganassi Cadillac. Another IndyCar driver joining the GTP class is Colton Herta. The current Andretti IndyCar driver will join the BMW team driving the number 25 BMW M Hybrid V8. And those aren't the only 2 drivers in GTP, as Helio Castroneves and Simon Pagenaud will once again pilot the number 60 Meyer-Shank Racing. In LMP2, Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin will be piloting the number 8 Tower Motorsports car. And those aren't the only 2 drivers in LMP2, as current Andretti driver Devlin De Francesco will drive the number 51 Rick Ware racing car. Dutch driver Rinus VeeKay will also return to Daytona for the 3rd time, racing in LMP2 with the number 11 TDS racing car. Moving on to GTD Pro, and we have another current Andretti driver from IndyCar joining the grid, and it's Romain Grosjean, and he will drive the number 66 Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2. Moving on to our final two drivers who are in GTD. Driving the number 12 Lexus RCF GT3 is Kyle Kirkwood. And finally, the 2022 IndyCar champion Will Power will join the grid and drive the number 75 Sun Energy One Racing Mercedes GT3 car. In other news related to the Daytona 24-hour, a huge partnership has come about. The news is on Wayne Taylor Racing, the same team which won the Daytona 24 Hours 4 different times, starting off in 2017. WTR has partnered up with Andretti Autosport, Andretti being one of the biggest racing teams in the entire world. This means that Andretti Autosport is making their return to Daytona and IMSA. Of course, before this partnership even began, WTR was already committed to running an entry at the Daytona 24 Hours, which is the ARX-06 LMDh. So this partnership means that Andretti is officially a part of the GTP class from 2023 going forward. We won't see a huge difference in terms of the racing on track, but hopefully Andretti Autosport will help the WTR brand as a whole. So that concludes our video on the 10 things you need to know before the 24 hours of Daytona in 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more endurance content from either one of our channels, click one of the suggested videos to the right of your screen. So that concludes things. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next video.